I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this bill, and I acknowledge my comments for the member for Murray and the member for Hunter. And I say to the minister, thank you for what you've done, but it's not nearly enough. And I pick up the point that the member for Murray has made about Senator Mackenzie's visit. And it's true, it's absolutely true. The senator came to Indi and to Murray, to Gippsland and down to Corangamite, and she did listen. That's true. But where we have this massive failure is the action from the listening. And it's really fantastic that government comes and listens. But if they fail to take action on what our farmers are saying, it's for naught. So I've got Senator Mackenzie's report here, which I acknowledge. There are 9 recommendations and areas for action. And in this particular bit of legislation before the House, which it's great to see, only 2 get addressed. So there's a long, long way to go. And I have to say to the minister, consultation is important, but if you fail to act, you lose the trust of the people you've been consulting with. Let's leave that aside, because part of the discussion I want to have today is about the crisis hasn't gone away and there's still a lot to be done, and I'm really pleased that the member for Murray acknowledges that the government sees there's a crisis. That's good. And the second thing in my speech today, I'd like to actually talk about what's happening in North-East Victoria, a fantastic, innovative, local grassroots knowledge, grassroots model of how our community is getting together to actually take action on their behalf. But first I need to talk about some of the indicators that the crisis hasn't gone away, that we are not debating in isolation here, that in my own area the charitable donations and money in terms of food vouchers, $45,000, it's almost gone. So there's nothing left in the local kitty to give out to farmers. And there's a number of reasons. Farmers are either not getting Farm Household Allowance, which the member for Hunter talked about, and if they do get the allowance, for many of them it's very, very low. Businesses in the area are also struggling because they are not getting paid because the dairy farmers cannot pay their bills. There's a lot of financial pain and mental health issues, and increasingly people are not in a fit state to come and make good business decisions. There's underlying anger, people are in shock and they're struggling. So there's a whole lot of evidence that it hasn't gone away. There are real problems that were identified in Senator Mackenzie's report, good, and the government needs to take action urgently on it. So that's before the House. It doesn't need any more words from me. But what I'd particularly like now to do is focus my comments on some of the fantastic work that's happening in North-East Victoria. And at this point, I'd just like to acknowledge some of the members in the gallery today. It's great to have you here. Thanks for making the effort to come to Canberra. So what I want to talk about is North-East Victoria and the Alpine Valleys. So the Alpine Valleys are the Kiewa Valley, the Midda Valley and the Murray Valley, and a bit of the Ovens and King Valleys. And this community has got together and they've formed a grassroots community group called the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway Project. And they've done some really strategic thinking about the global impact of in dairying and how they can work locally. And I'm very proud to be their representative and bring to the House a model of really good work of how we can manage and work with the crisis we're facing, and then call on the government to come in partnership with this community group and see if we can replicate it in other areas of the dairy industry and agricultural industries, because I think this model has got huge potential where we get grassroots communities, local government, authorities, state government and industry to all work together. So I'm a really great advocate for that, and I'd like to place it before the attention of the minister at the table and say, can we think about how this model can be duplicated in other communities? So in acknowledging the work of this committee, and I'm going to talk about it in some detail, I'd actually like to place on Hansard the tremendous leadership role of the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway Project in their community, and to name and say thank you to Stuart. And in talking to you, Stuart, I also acknowledge the role of Sarah and all the partners, because we all know these things don't happen. There's no such thing as a farmer. There's farming families and farming businesses. So to all your families, to Lauren, to Scott, to Pat, to Patton, to Lockie, and to the members of the steering committee, the North East CMA, to the local processor Murray Goulburn, to North East Learning Network, to Murray Dairy, which is the Commonwealth Government and local research and development team, to the Rural Financial Counselling Services, to the local governments of Indigo, Wangaratta, Towong and Alpine, who form the steering committee, and to the education services and providers who are also there. So the steering committee is wide-reaching and it covers off most of the service providers and the farmers in the Alpine valleys. It was, the AVDPP was established in 2011, and it's a unique model. It began as a grassroots movement driven by farmers and is now actively supported by all those people in the steering committee. And the project aim is to provide strong, consistent and cohesive messages about how we can work together to grow and develop dairying in North East Victoria. And it decided to take a leadership role. It set clear goals. It's got a comprehensive strategic plan to actually grow milk production by 80% by 2025. And that would actually mean growing the local industry by 400 mills in the Alpine Valley by 2025. And recent Dairy Australia figures indicate milk production in the region has already increased by, say, 30% in the past 10 years despite the drought. So there's huge potential to grow it more. The AVDPP model has proven a powerful tool in creating change and has delivered several high-quality projects to date, which focuses on education, farm succession planning and transition, and planning for growth. And it's grown into be a really well-respected voice for the dairy industry in North East Victoria. And we are seeing great change happen across all levels of government because of this community leadership. I'd just like to read into the Hansard and to bring to the attention of the government some of the priority areas that this group is working in and the consideration that it's noting for the future. They're looking for a medium to long-term planning approach. So as we move through this discussion of farm household support, we've actually got to think about the medium and the long term and the future. We've got to talk about water security. We need to talk about supporting farm succession and transition. We need to talk about agriculture in schools. We need to talk about place-based ownership and solutions. So not the logic of one size fitting everybody just doesn't work in rural and regional Australia. As we heard in the discussion this morning about childcare, we've got to be able to have place-based solutions that respond to local needs. We really need to keep up with technology and innovation. And it's been a resounding call from me as a member for Indi. We've got to do better with NBN, we've got to do better with mobile phones, because these dairy businesses are hugely technologically connected, and access to mobile phones to move your electric fences and to do all the work that goes with it. So the technology is relying on that mobile phone connectivity. And it's only, I'll talk at another time and place, but how disappointed I am that the mobile phone project has ended, that there's no money for round 4. We did well in Indi, didn't we? But no round 4. And I have to say to the Minister, there's 150 identified black spots still in Indi. We need more in the budget, so thank you for that. I look forward to working with you on it. But mobile phone technology is really important. We've also one of the issues is about positive messages about the industry. So we're hearing about the crisis and the demise, but in fact the industry has got a fantastic future. And we need to talk more about the business skills. As we move and develop and grow, how do we actually get the business skills to our farming families? And that includes working with farmers as employers. So some of the issues that the Alpine Valleys are working with. But I want to move on to an amazing thing that this community did in terms of addressing the crisis that we're facing in the dairy industry. Last Wednesday, they called a community meeting, and 100 farming people turned up to that meeting, including service providers, including local government representatives, and I was delighted to welcome the member for Mayo representing the Nick Xenothon team, who came and spoke about the Nick Xenothon team's approach to their agricultural policy. And I have to say how well she was received. So thank you, Member for Mayo, for coming, and we really look forward to working with you as you develop your agricultural policies. There's a lot in what you've got to offer us. So as a result of that meeting, there was a number of issues that the meeting asked me to bring to Canberra. So I'll talk about those briefly. They wanted a clear vision of how community groups like Alpine Valley's Dairy Pathway Project can actually work with government. For them, they said, but Cathy, where do we fit? where's government going to work with us? What's the connectivity here between a community group that's got all the industry together in a region and the Commonwealth Government? And they're so right, because there's no connectivity. What do they do? How can they input into the industry when there's no place for them? So a clear vision for links between government and industry and community groups. And they ask for also a strategic approach for all levels of education. They see that educating not only farmers but the workforce is going to be key for the future. And the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway Project, I have to commend them, have done a fantastic job working with Tallangatta High School on getting education programs out onto the farms, but also building with the careers teacher and understanding all the other jobs that go with agriculture. So it's the science, it's the manufacturing, it's the marketing, it's the distribution, it's the education, it's the international trade. It's all the fantastic jobs that we can offer in rural and regional Australia if and when we have a growing agricultural sector. So education is really important. And the investment in the next generation. So there's no shortage of young people who want to come to agriculture and be involved in the industry, but the how is a real challenge. So one of the projects that the Alpine Valleys are working on is this farm succession and transition. So how can you provide security for the older farmers who want to stay a little bit in agriculture, maybe share farming, helping with the financing, so we get the new generation coming in and getting the transfer of skill and knowledge and all that wonderful culture that our farming community has passed on to the new generation. So they're actively working there. And I just want to put a little bit of the data on the table about how important the dairy industry is already in my electorate and what enormous potential it's got to grow. So in Indi, actually just in the northeast, 80% of the arable land is done by dairying industry. And it's 30% of the farm gate income, which is just huge. That we've got over 750 effective full-time local jobs working on farm, in manufacturing and the service industry. So that's not inconsiderable, 750 jobs. And we estimated that it's over $380 million into the supply chain. $380 million. So this is a really significant industry. And while we're actually going through change, this doesn't have the change is there's opportunity in the change. It doesn't have to be the end. So I really support this debate today to say, OK, the Farm Household Allowance is a stopgap measure to provide a safety net, but where's the plan? Where do we want the dairying industry to grow to? And I think that's the main thing that I really want to talk about today in the final bit of my talk, that the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway Project has got a plan to lift performance of all farmers up to the top 25%. And they're really focusing on people, engagement, knowledge transfer and new skills. They're implementing their workforce strategy. They're bringing the kids out of school and they're talking about where the jobs are. They're actually working on the farm succession and transition, and they've got a target of 50% of farm family businesses having a strategy in place. I mean, what an innovation that is, actually working with your farmers, all your farmers, your young and your oldies, but to actually have a transition scheme in place now so that you can bring people with you, can have the change and you can grow your industry. And they're really actively working on the schools engagement process. So, you know, I'm a great fan, clearly, of education and how important it is. It needs to happen at schools, it needs to happen in vocational education and training, and we need then to work particularly with our universities to make sure that we've got the degree courses and the pathways through. And I'm delighted to say we do have that in Indi. We've got great work happening with La Trobe and CSU. It's good to have you there. But finally, my comments are this. We have got an opportunity with the dairy industry. Sure, it's going through a crisis, but we will move through that. And if, with the right partnership and the right vision from government about how we can work together, we can really grow this industry. So in closing, representatives from this community meeting will be in Parliament on the week of the 20th of March. I look forward to bringing them to Canberra and introducing them to the relevant ministers and their staff, and talking about how we can take this fantastic model, we can grow it in my electorate, but also to those other electorates throughout Australia who are needing a bit of a roadmap about how they can move from crisis to growth. I'd like to say that the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway Project is doing the work. it's growing businesses and it's growing leaders. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for Indi. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Mallee.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, I am pleased to talk about the Farm Household Support Amendment Bill.